Hey everyone, I'm Ben. I'm an animator,
And I'm John, and I'm a comics writer.
and welcome to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. Oh, wait, I just said that. I forget what I've already recorded and what I haven't. Welcome back, everybody. This is Ben, and I am super excited to share with you part two of writing comics with John Sollitto. So this was all part of one conversation that I had over Skype with my friend John, who, if you haven't listened to the first part, I met while working at Stupid Buddy Studios, which I'm still at. We're in the last couple weeks of the project, and I'm super pumped to be able to finish it out. John was working on Robot Chicken at the time, and as we talked about in the last episode, John has had a ton of experience in the entertainment arts, working for video games, working in casting, but primarily we talk about John writing his own graphic novel series, Veritas, self-published, and we get into that into this episode. So check out part one for kind of how that came about, and then in part two, we talk about how John writes his dialogue, how he writes his characters, his goals for writing his comic Veritas, and his advice for anyone looking at publishing their own comic series. So I hope you guys enjoy part two with John Sollitto. And I think an interesting point that you were just making is that you're changing it up into the last second. So sometimes, and this is my transition into lettering, because I know that not only are you the guy who writes the comics, you have Davis doing the art, but you're also the guy who's dropping in the words, in the word bubbles for every panel. So is it even all the way up into that point you're dropping jokes, or is it even before that point?
Oh yeah. Uh, I hate that I write Marvel method sometimes, and it is a consequence of being nine different roles in this process. So are you familiar with that term, the Marvel method?
I am not. Let's hear it.
Okay. That is a callback to when Stan Lee was really in charge of Marvel for a long time and was one of the primary writers and editors for a lot of their stories. Um, how Marvel used to write would be someone would write a synopsis of the story and what would happen on each page. The artist would draw that, and then the writer would come in with the letterer, and then they would write the words based off of now what the picture showed. So it was kind of
Back and forth, right?
it was a weird sort of guessing game where they were like, here's what we want to happen, here's what we would like these people to say on this page, please draw this. Okay, well, that's not exactly what I wanted to happen, but now we have to make it work, and that would be how that worked. Sometimes when you get art, it is different in on page than it is in your head, and finding a way to marry the storytelling that an artist does with you is really important for a visual medium that is 50-50. You
Mhm.
know, making your artist a slave to your words is not allowing them to have fun. And it's kind of like, if you draw everything exactly the way that I want you to draw it, you will get paid. That's not enjoyable.
That's
That's not,
slavery.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can do that. It's entirely possible, and it's up to you if that's how you want to spend your money and you found an artist who's willing to do that. But that's not when you get really good comics, in my opinion. When you can tell everybody was having fun behind the scenes making this, that's when you really enjoy the comic. Um, so when I get some of Davis's pages, sometimes I'll like what he drew better than what I wrote, and I'll just change stuff because I had these very serious words happening, but then they're smiling in that panel, and I'm like, I like that better.
Yeah.
I'll change the words to fit that, and then I'm like, I'll get to that stuff eventually. I can table that conversation for a later date. Um, and it's I had gotten some feedback from a few friends who were like, "Hey, I really want to know this thing," and I go, "Okay." Some of that can wait till later. I hadn't realized that I never explicitly said that this program in the comic had only been around for a year.
Mhm.
In the 5 issues up to issue 6, I'd never once said that. I was like, oh, that's a really important piece of information that the reader should know. So I changed an entire conversation in issue 6 to be relative to that entire fact and to explain that without saying, since this program has only been around for a year, because that's boring.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
you have to find ways of saying that while also giving different information so that it's like it's like giving a dog a pill, you know? You got to put it in something that they're going to eat so that they don't mind it, but then they're like, oh, exposition, but also
Right.
these are interesting things that I want to know.
That's a fantastic analogy. I love
It's
that.
but that's kind of how that works, is because
Yeah.
you don't want your reader to be sitting there reading what is effectively a Wikipedia plot summary of your world.
Right.
That's boring. There's someone somewhere, fingers crossed, God willing, will write a wiki for Veritas, and they can do that. I would love that. I think that'd be great. I will have officially made it in this world if there is a wiki for Veritas at some point in my lifetime. Um,
Yes. We'll make that happen. The
oh,
podcast will get that happen. Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
But if I am going to deliver information, my biggest thing is, does this come across in a way that isn't boring, or is it supposed to be boring? Is this a boring person delivering this information? Is this boring information? How can I give the readers what they want while also telling them something that they need to know? And if they don't get it, okay, maybe that's because I wasn't clear enough and I need to be clearer in my own writing, or maybe they just missed it and maybe I'm okay with them missing that.
Right. You're leaving that crumb trail either way.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of Claremonting, which is Chris Claremont was the writer on X-Men for, I'm going to say, like 17 years.
Wow.
And he would put something in issue like 20 that would then pay off in issue 50.
Dang.
And I love that. I love the idea of, like, you don't know what's important in my comic, so pay attention. Maybe I'll hint it here in this conversation. Maybe I'll mention a name here that will become important in 13 issues. You don't know. But then you'll reread the comic and be like, oh my God, he said that in issue 6 and it's issue 20 and now we're just learning about that.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it fun to read, for me personally, like, already, based on just the issues that I've read, which is, I think, up through page 3, I want to say, is from, because I'm reading on your website. Uh, there's so much intricacy here, and like the interplay between the characters. And that's actually something I wanted to hop on real fast, because you are revealing so much of the history and, what's happening in the story through dialogue. You've done a fantastic job of creating individual characters that really feel like real people. And
Oh,
so
thank you.
yeah, no, oh, that's why I love reading it. And if Christian, my brother, was here, that's what he loves the most too. That's in his writing, he's all about dialogue. And so I think he would geek out with me when we say that your dialogue is fantastic. And so that's something I want to hit on from a writer's perspective, is how do you write these characters with different personalities?
Uh, lot of watching The West Wing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shows, and honestly, I think Sorkin is one of the best writers of dialogue that we've ever seen as far as television goes. Maybe some of his stories aren't so good, but I think that as a person who writes two different people having a conversation at the same time, he's one of the best. I would say if you haven't ever watched The West Wing, I would watch episodes focusing on Josh and Toby, two very different men who do the exact same thing in the exact same place, but one of them is depressed and the other one is a narcissist.
Mm.
And watching the two of them talk to each other about what they have to do. They speak the same language, they just say it in different tones, kind of a thing. And it's very interesting to watch. Same thing with watching an episode that focuses primarily on CJ, who is an utterly incredibly charismatic woman who has to watch what she says to the press, but behind closed doors when she's with her coworkers has an entirely different way of speaking altogether. And seeing what's professional and what's personal. Things that she would say in the newsroom versus things that she would say in the Oval Office. And that's really interesting to kind of see, because you also have to look at how people talk in general. In a conversation, normally, this is my biggest one that's a pet peeve for me that I see in comics all the time, but I love pointing this out. I was watching Veronica Mars the other day, actually, with my sister, and I noticed in a conversation, the two characters said each other's names 6 times in the same conversation.
Which
And I was
doesn't feel
like,
natural, right?
no, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's just the two of you. Who are you saying? Whose benefit is it that you say Veronica's name? Does she not know who you're talking to? Like it's things like that where you have to like
Right.
sit down and realize, I've maybe said your name once or twice this entire interview
Yeah.
because it's just us, and I trust that you understand I'm talking to you. However, in a conversation specifically where I'm trying to get your attention, I'll say, now look, Ben, this is important.
Hmm.
It's highlighting. It's things like that. How to make natural dialogue is literally just looking at people you talk to on a daily basis and seeing how often does that person say hella?
Yeah.
Is it a lot? I say like a bunch because I grew up in California. What's regional slang? How do you find that out? Is it Googling conversations between people in New York versus conversations with people in North Dakota? I love watching Letterkenny on Hulu because it's a Canadian comedy show and they have an entirely different vernacular. And I'm like, what is funny in Canada? What are their jocks? Oh, they're hockey players. How do their hockey players talk? How do Canadian Hicks speak? What are phrases that they say all the time to each other? It's things like that of just trying to make it. If you're trying to make it natural, you have to actually watch people talk. Watch the news. Watch them interview people.
Yeah.
Watch how a person would talk when they think they're getting on television versus they're being, they're recounting a story to their friend. You know,
Right.
um, one of the best writers of dialogue, I think, in comics right now is Gail Simone. She has written dozens of top tier titles for DC and Marvel, and she's so good. And I love her dialogue because it feels normal. People are funny who should be funny. People have very loquacious dialogue because they're putting on airs. There's someone who speaks very little and has very stoic ways of speaking. She wrote a comic for a long time called Secret Six, which had like Bane and Catman and all these other characters that are like very weird. But you had Bane talking to it's like Deadshot, and Bane speaks a very different way than Deadshot, and it's hard to find that. It's hard
Yeah.
to really understand, where you come from and how you speak, but also how would somebody else speak. And that's a part of the taking your ego out of the equation thing. Um,
Right.
and it's also sometimes it takes sitting down, going, okay, where does this person come from? Like
Right.
with Shieldbait and Veritas, I'm like, okay, I have family that lives in Long Island, and I know kind of who Veritas is based off of like I know the upbringing he's had. He has two parents. His dad does this. His mom does this. He's this old. He grew up in Long Island, so he could have a little bit of slang to him if he wanted to. I have not written his accent phonetically because I can't.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, he sounds like a Long Islander. He doesn't have a standard American accent because he grew up in New York. So,
Right.
versus Shieldmaiden has a kind of standard American accent because she's from Michigan. To me, this is just a kind of a segue and sort of a related thing. Superman sounds Southern. He grew up in Kansas.
Right.
He has a Southern accent, like he should. He
Yeah.
should say certain things
Right.
that have an accent. So the same thing with the Flash. The Flash should have some sort of country accent because Central City's in Kansas. Green Lantern should say dude. He grew up in California.
Yeah.
It's like Coast City is supposed to be San Diego. So these people should have things that they say that reveal bits about them based off of where they live. I have character Bibles for each of the major characters so far that are about where they're from, who they are, how old are they, what have they done with their life, what are their motivations. Since you've read through issues 1 through 5, Patel is a very different person than Wells, and those two detectives who are kind of the pretty boy, good at his job, but likes to let people know that he's good at his job, working with someone who is very by the book and very passionate about being a detective, is it's just watching a buddy cop movie.
Yeah.
Watch Lethal Weapon. they're just the characters from Lethal Weapon. You know, it's that's
Right.
kind of the thing, is like
Tools in
they're
the tool belt.
exactly, it's, you know, it's okay, what's a buddy cop situation? Okay, you got to have one that's weird and one that isn't, you
Mhm.
know. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just another white guy and a black guy. So Patel is Indian and Wells is an African American man, and I wanted to just subvert some of these genre things to make it just like, oh, they're not different because they're, you know, different races. They're different because they're different people.
Mhm. Right.
They have different motivations. They have different things about them that are important. You know, Patel obviously likes being a cop, but he also likes, you know, being known because he's a narcissist, and
Yeah.
he's, you know, he likes being seen. Wells is the guy who will quietly take a commendation and not make a big deal out of it because his whole thing is stopping the bad guys. You know, it's part of his job, is getting the recognition. Jack is a bit of a klutz and a dork and weird and awkward as a superhero because he's never done this before.
Yeah, he's
Whereas,
the new guy. Yeah.
so he's got to be a little bit bumbling
Mhm.
because he has to kind of be struggling with this new job. Versus Shield Maiden, this is business as usual for her. The hardest part is doing it by the book. She's a natural superhero. That's what I love about her character, is that
Mhm.
this is old hat to her. You know, none of this is surprising. She just wants to get it done. So she's a bit aggressive because she's pissed off that she has to go through so much red tape.
Right.
So she will maybe get a little bit angrier when she doesn't want to, or get more frustrated because this is upsetting to her. You know, it's a lot of uh spinning plates. You know, who's mad
Right.
today, who's happy in this situation, who has the power here and who doesn't. I love scenes with Clark and Becker.
Mhm.
I love writing them because they are two very different individuals coming from a very different background, and they've seen different things. Becker, um, I hinted this in issues like 1 and 2. Becker's really old. Becker has been around
Yeah.
since World War II. I have not talked about the fact that she looks like Helen Mirren still. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, she looks good for someone who was probably 20 in 1940.
Mhm.
And I just have not talked about that. But she's also seen World War II, the Cold War, Vietnam. She's seen a lot in her lifetime.
Mhm.
Versus Clark is late 40s, maybe,
Yeah.
and also has seen a lot, but from a different perspective, not as a superhero. As a lawyer, he's seen the legal system change
Mm.
from the last 40 years. You know, if you look at like when he grew up probably during Rudy Giuliani New York, which was dealing with the mafia.
Mm.
So they've got different perspectives and things that are important to them, but they want the same goal. And how they go about getting that goal is really what changes their personalities or their interplay with each other.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it's just like you're talking about with West Wing, is like those characters kind of in the same situation, but because of their different status, different worldviews, different ways of looking at things, that they interact very differently. And that totally reads in your comic. That's awesome.
Thank you. It's always nice to know that I'm not screwing it up.
Yeah. Well, and too, I mean, I just gotta say this just as an aside. I don't think I even have a question about it, but just, seeing Jack as kind of the new guy, and then him always kind of battling in himself, like saying those quips while he's fighting, is just so appealing.
Yeah, I mean, he's supposed to be the reader. Jack is every person who's ever read a superhero comic and in love with superheroes. Jack is a superhero nerd,
Mm.
and he's the perspective character for the reader who's like, I've seen 1,000 superhero comics before. Jack is the guy who gets superpowers and thinks, I know how to do this,
Mhm.
and is woefully unprepared.
Yeah.
The only thing the only thing he's got going for him is the fact that he's a nerd about superheroes. And he's good at what he does, but he's definitely still learning. And it was really important for me also to show his trauma.
Right.
Um, that is a central storyline and plot line for issues 1 through 6, is him getting shot for the first time. And that will be dealt with over time. It will not be finished in this arc because that's not how trauma works.
Hmm.
And I'm very adamant about not minimizing the effect of trauma on an individual. Because I think that's also something that we don't talk about in superhero stories a lot. So Jack is going to do things because he has trauma that he probably wouldn't normally do. Like in issue 5, he's like, "No, I want to learn how to
Take the
take the hit.
hits.
Yeah, I want to learn how to do that." And he does, except he thought he was safe because he had the
Yeah,
bulletproof
the
vest on.
bulletproof. Which then, great. Speaking of visual gag, when they pull it off and reveal that there was nothing in it that whole time.
Yeah, and it's a placebo effect. It's like when somebody gets betrayed in that way, how does that change their entire perception of an experience where they thought they were safe? It's like telling somebody who's a skydiver, "Don't worry about it. You have an extra parachute." And they feel okay because they're scared if one of the parachutes break, and they didn't have a second parachute the whole time. Two things are going
Yeah.
to happen. One, they will feel relieved, or two, they're going to get real mad at you that you didn't give them a second parachute.
Right, or scared about next time.
Exactly. They're like, "Well,
Yeah.
I didn't overcome my fear because my fear was worse."
Yeah.
The actual situation was more terrifying than I was led to believe, and now I'm even more afraid. And so that's kind of what Jack's thing is. He's not sure what's going on. It's important to show that superheroes have those issues and have those moments and would react like normal people, because they're not all Batman. Batman had some very serious trauma happen to him when he was young and never really dealt with it. And that's always bothered me about the character. His way of dealing with it was becoming Batman and projecting onto everyone else by going like, "I will make sure that no one else has this problem ever again." Or, "Oh my God, your parents were killed in front of you too, Robin? We're best friends now."
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, Batman's a great character. I think it's a disservice, though, as writers, to not deal with the elephant in the room, which is his mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And after 80 years of comics, one would assume Bruce would see a psychiatrist at some point.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
And that's always bothered me, is that we've never really dealt with that. And I wanted to make a point of starting to deal with that in Veritas to make it people relate to it. Like, oh my God, I get what it feels like to like be afraid, and then like start to see that fear in different things.
Mm-hmm.
And not know why you're seeing it in places that you didn't know you would see it in. Because that's really where you start to get to the heart of your trauma, is trying to connect the dots of, why am I having these problems in these different situations? What about them are the same? Oh, I'm not scared of fish. I'm scared of the fact that I'm allergic to fish, and I'm afraid of, finding something that I'm unaware that I'm allergic of and having an attack. That's really what's going on. And sometimes it's more complicated than that, but that's kind of the thing that happens with people, is like, why am I afraid of speaking in front of other people? Because I'm embarrassed about, a speech impediment that I have. Why am I embarrassed about that? Because I think people won't take me seriously, because if they don't take me seriously, I won't get anywhere in life, kind of a thing. Like, it's those trains of thought that make people and dictate what they do. And it's never a bad thing, as long as we understand it and we move forward with it and we try and understand it in a way that's healthy. And I want to show both the healthy and unhealthy ways that people deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that's what's cool about it too, is I've gotten that from reading your comics thus far about, in episode 1 when Jack is getting shot. Spoiler alert for everyone who hasn't read it yet.
It's the first 4 pages.
Yeah. And I think I want to hit on something that you were talking about a second ago, and that is dealing with it throughout the issues. So along with dealing with that part of Jack's character, what are your plans for Veritas as you move into the future and writing this comic?
Right now, the next couple of volumes, I want to really flesh the world out and kind of show, okay, this is the game that we're playing right now. These are the stakes. These are the people that are involved. Here's everybody who's important. Now let's get into it. Mm-hmm. Conversely, beyond what the plot-wise decisions I want to make, Veritas has always been for me something that I wanted to give people who were underrepresented in comics. I have very few straight white male characters in the comic. Jack being straight white and male is kind of a satire on that genre by having him be not so good, and the woman that is training him be a woman of color who has more experience and is not so much like a grizzled veteran, but a person who has expertise. And I wanted to show that, and I wanted to show his eagerness to learn from her, because I thought it was important to show a variation of that dynamic that we haven't seen before, because you really don't have any femme characters or femme presenting characters in comics who have male sidekicks. I wanted to show that this was what they were going to be, was a dynamic duo. And I wanted to also show, okay, we're in New York City with the most diverse population possible. Patel is an Indian man. There's lots of Latinx characters in this comic as well. Different nationalities are going to be represented on purpose, because I want to show this isn't just people who have the opportunity to thing. This is everybody who has the ability, can, and is promoted and encouraged to do it. And that's really important for me, because I want people to see characters that they can relate to, characters that they've never seen in mainstream comics getting the screen time that they deserve. Because I fully believe everyone deserves a story that speaks to them. They deserve a good one. They don't just deserve, some throwaway cartoon or
pandering or something, right?
They don't, that's nice because it gets us to the point where we get used to seeing it. But I want everyone to have a great version of something that speaks to them. I love the show Craig of the Creek on Cartoon Network, because it is a primarily POC driven show, and it speaks to so many people of color in America who have very similar experiences. And it's well written, it's very heartwarming, and it's funny. And I'm like, that is a perfect example of a show that people deserve. You don't just deserve a show just because, oh, look, we did this thing for you and here it is and that's all you get. No, everyone deserves an Emmy award-winning, Academy Award-winning, Hugo winning, Eisner winning, whatever, that speaks to them. Because the art is for everyone, therefore you should get a quality piece of content.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's just been my goal for Veritas. Is I understand that as a straight white man, there's so many experiences that I can write about with authority, but I'm also going out of my way to listen to people who haven't written comics, who are my friends, who are talking about things that they would love to see, things that speak to them, and also their critiques and criticisms, because I'm still learning too, and I want to provide a natural, realistic portrayal of a lot of these characters. So I go out of my way to really try and do that, because that's the work that you have to do. You don't get to just say, oh, I read some Wikipedia articles about, Kwanzaa. I understand the Afro-American, struggle.
Experience.
Yeah. No, it's not how that works. I mean, like, there's a sequence in issue 1 where Shield Maiden speaks to a woman that was just saved by Veritas, and the woman is mad that Veritas is a trainee. And she was like, you let this kid, this rookie save me when I was in real danger? And Shield Maiden's like, are you hurt? No. Are the people who tried to hurt you being arrested? Yes. What's your problem? What's the issue here? You should be thanking him because he saved you. He didn't have to. This is his job. He wanted to do this for you. You got the thing done. Why are you mad at him? And the woman says thank you and walks away. And I was really worried about that interaction coming across as the angry black woman stereotype. And I didn't want that to fall into that. And some people may read that and they may see that, and that's fine because that's their perspective, and I respect that they see that from that situation. But I asked a number of my friends, specifically women of color, and I said, hey, am I off the mark here? Am I doing the bad thing? And I took their notes to heart very specifically because I wanted to make sure I wasn't misrepresenting women of color.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the work that you have to do if your intent is to provide this.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of homework, a lot of personal it's a lot of removing myself from the situation and saying like, well, I don't think that's the way that it is. Just because I don't think that's the way that it is doesn't mean that it is not that way. So I have to take that information into account, understand that, and make it not about me, make it about the people that I'm making the comic for.
Mm-hmm.
I can write my story and be happy with it. The second part of this is making a comic that people want to read because they feel represented.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confident in my story writing. What I'm not confident in is the representation. And I want to make sure that in the future, as I continue to write this comic, I am representing people properly and in a way that is both positive and that they get something from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's cool too, because not only are you doing that with people of different, ethnic backgrounds or, just different life experiences, but also just even as we were talking about earlier with Jack's trauma, like not dealing with that too quickly, I think is also helping in comics to represent that as well for people who are reading and, who maybe experience something like that.
You care more about characters that you can relate to because they're relatable because you see yourself in them. And it's not that I want people to go like, I could be that character because I am also a person of color. It's like, oh my God, no, I get what it's like having a dad that you talk to every week who says the same shit to you and is always asking if you're dating someone.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe in my culture, they're really concerned that I'm single. It's a weird cultural thing that my dad doesn't like that I'm single and I'm 30.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, that's so true. Or, Jack with his parents in issue 2.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got an overbearing parent at some point in their life. Everyone can relate to a parent who is trying a little too hard to help you and is maybe actually calling you an idiot when they're trying to give you advice.
Yeah, which I have to say, and I know we talked about this before. That's one of my favorite interactions in the whole comic. I think is just, and for the people who haven't read it yet, it's between Jack, his father, and his mother, who comes up in the middle of their conversation, and it's just, I think that dynamic between the three is so strong, and it really helps, at least me anyway, as the reader coming to it and seeing all the decisions that Jack makes based on his family experience, and I think that that's all the things that you've been talking about with doing your research, gathering the tools in the tool belt, and then really making something that appeals and is applying to so many people's lives. I think that's just incredible. I wish I had a question to go along with that, but I just want to
No,
say you're doing awesome. Yeah.
I mean, well, thank you. I just it's very hard to not make caricatures. And the I'm well, yeah. I mean, because it's easy to make them. It's harder to be like, nope, not going to do that thing. Not going to do that thing that's really easy. Not going to play into that stereotype. Um, and that's really one of the biggest struggles I think with characters is, everybody's written self-insert fan fiction. Everybody's written somebody else's characters the way that they want them to because it appeals to the sensibility that they have or that they want. It's another thing to look at people that you've known in your life, look at situations that you've had, and put them in front of other people and be like, this is kind of part of my life. And does this resonate with you? It's very easy to write the fantasy version of everything. It's harder to write real life. And writing that interaction between Jack and his mother was very hard. I have a really hard time writing characters I hate. Because I don't like them and I don't want them to be happy and I don't want them to say the things that they say. And it took a long time for me to purposely go out of my way to read characters that I hated to understand why I don't like them, what it is about them that I was mislabeling as poor writing and realizing, no, they're written really, really well because I hate them this much.
Yeah.
And writing Jack's mom was really hard because I hate people like her.
Yeah.
And I think they're just so mean And I was like, nope, write her that way. Don't
Yeah.
make her a good mother. Write her this way. And that was so hard to do. Like I loved writing his dad. His dad is very sweet. I wanted to show a very healthy masculine relationship between a father and son. I thought that was really
Mhm.
important.
Yeah.
Um, and then his mother is this huge, and I was like, God, I hate this so much, but I have to write it because it's important. Because this is
Yeah.
relatable. This is a thing that people experience. It's like sometimes you have that one parent that's the best, and you've got it's good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, his mom loves him. 100% his mother loves him. But there's a very deep reason why she acts the way that she does with him that I haven't explained yet, that I will explain at some point. But his mom is dealing with a lot. And there's a reason she is so hard up on Jack about being a superhero. And it's both sad and understandable, but the way that it's coming out makes you mad at her. And that's hard to write, at least for me. But
Yeah.
some
Oh
people can
yeah.
write that. I mean, I hate Damian Wayne in DC Comics, Bruce's son. I hate Batman's kid so much. He's the worst. But I know friends who are like, I love that he's a little hate it so much, but also
Yeah.
like that's the point. You're supposed to hate him.
Yeah.
That's the point because that's his starting point, and then he gets better. And
Yeah.
it's just like sometimes you just got to get through it. Sometimes you got to grit your teeth and read a bunch of you don't like because you're trying to deliver the same experience. If I don't like a character that I'm writing that because they're terrible, it's a win for me.
Hmm.
Because I'm like, yeah, no, I hate this person. I hate them a lot. That's good. That's the way this should be. I'm doing the thing because I hate this person so much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think you brought up something that's important to say, and it's you're writing those characters that way, um, for the purpose of, your main character's growth, that character's growth, and having to explore those difficult topics through your writing, which is, like you're saying, hard to do, but that's what makes really strong storytelling.
Yeah, I think a lot of the most powerful stories in the world, not to say that my comic is utterly powerful
Yeah.
and an award-winning achievement. It's, like it's Grapes of Wrath. It's a
Mm-hmm.
really tough situation that a lot of people were through that was real, and people saw human reactions that were real and guttural and visceral and nuts to think about, but that was a real thing. Farewell to Manzanar about the Japanese internment camps.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic book, horrifying to read.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just heartbreaking to think that that was a thing that we did, um, which echoes a lot right now, you know. Um,
Right.
and it's really the things that talk about stuff that we can all relate to that reach us the most.
Mm-hmm.
If I have this problem and I see it somewhere else in fiction, I immediately latch onto that and relate to it more. Therefore, this now means more to me because I'm seeing my story.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's actually what I want to transition into now is, um, now that you've been writing this fantastic comic and it keeps coming out, you keep updating it like 3 times a week, which is just crazy. Um, as you move forward, kind of into the future, and you're doing things independently, what would be some advice you would give to someone who would want to do their own independent comic? Like, as you're writing your own art and saying what's important to you, what advice would you give to them?
Firstly, find out what it is that you enjoy about the thing that you're doing. Um, everyone always says this when it comes to following your dream. If you could literally see yourself doing anything else, don't do this thing. If you could see yourself being a bank manager instead of, you know, a comics artist, don't be a comics artist. And it's not because you don't belong, it's because this will rip you up and spit you out and step on you a lot, and it's going to hurt, and it takes a lot of you to do
Mm,
this. It's a lot of stress, a lot of internalization of things, a lot of externalization of things. It's sharing art that's very personal to you. It's talking about it. It's researching it. It's diving into who you are and what you can make, seeing your own limitations, failing, succeeding, running into limitations that are outside of your control, i.e., money, access, privilege, things like that. That's
mhm.
important. Um, it's a hard business. And the cliche is, though, nothing that was ever good for you or nothing that you ever wanted was ever easy. So if this is something you want to do and you want to start, just kind of start researching it first. If you can come up with reasons why you don't want to do it, you don't really want it. And that's fine. There's no shame in that. I always say, if I can think of 3 reasons why I don't want to go out to a party, I don't really want to go. And I won't go because that's not what I want, and it won't make me happy to go to that. But if I can think of like one, which is like, nah, it's too far, it's not really a reason. I'm making an excuse. And I should try. I should see if I can do it because it might be good for me. If you can look at comics and be like, God, I don't have the money. I don't have the time for this. I'm not that good at this. I won't have access to that. There are ways around some of those things. And there are 1,000 resources online that will show you where you can publish for free. Like I said, Tapas and Webtoon are incredible, and all you have to have is the right file size.
And for everyone listening, those are apps as well as websites where people can read comics, correct?
Yes, those are. So you can use those. Understand, like, oh, this is how other comics work. Here are the most popular comics on this website. Now I'm understanding what people read, how often they update. Once you start finding the things that circumvent the issues that you have, you begin to learn more about what you can do, what's available to you at the time. Some things you're never going to get around, like getting a tablet if you want to be a digital artist. It's hard. It's hard. I'm not going to say that they're cheap or anything like that. But if you want to draw it on paper, you could just as easily take pictures of the pages that you drew and upload them online. And you know what? If you just say outright, I don't have a scanner, I don't have a digital tablet, no one's going to care. People might actually think it's cool that you're doing that.
Yeah.
It's low grade, man. It's vintage. It's low fidelity, kind of a thing. And make that your thing. Own up to that. Lean into it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, too, I think that's kind of tapping into something that's really appealing right now. It's kind of that do-it-yourself way because, like we talked about at the beginning and we're talking about now, there are these avenues that exist now where we, like we were talking about with video games, you get that feedback right away, or that you can put up your comic for free. We kind of live in this time where, at least I think, I don't know, I'll let you say what you think as well, but like where that's really celebrated, like, yeah, this guy just did it. He started out and made his own thing, and I want to check it out.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you can't do Tapas or Webtoon and like you don't have a laptop, you got a phone probably. I imagine a phone is probably a lot more commonplace than a laptop these days. You can get a Twitter account and post all your pictures on Twitter. Instagram too, Facebook. There are places where you can do the thing. You can find it. It's there for you. You just got it. I hate saying this, but like you gotta want it.
Yeah.
And if you don't want it, that's fine. There's nothing against you not wanting it. 100%. If it's not your thing and you don't want to work this hard, you just want to try it out, that's okay. But if you don't want it enough that you're going to go through these motions and go through all this research and do all this work, you may have just found that this is not your thing. But if this is what you want to do and you really want to make it happen and you really want to do the thing, again, I am not an Eisner Award-winning writer. I have not written for DC or Marvel, but I can speak from the experience of starting from nothing and going to where I am. You have to try, because you'll never know if you don't do it. And it would be a shame if you wrote yourself off of doing it without ever giving it a shot. And I would never wish that on anyone, for them to be like, oh, well, I just didn't have the time. It's like, yeah, if you say so. Because that's the thing, is like I drive 2 hours every day going to work. So To work, it's an hour. From work, it's an hour. I work 8 hours a day, sometimes more. I come back. It's about 7 o'clock at night. I have dinner. I do chores. I hang out with my family, and then from like 9 to 12, I write. I work on comics,
Mm,
and then I get up the next day and I do it again.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm tired all the time. Yeah, I wish I could just watch TV and play video games all day. Um, but I want to do this, and I do this.
Yeah.
And this is how I go about it. I mean, some days I take breaks. Tuesdays and Thursdays I don't work on comics if I don't feel like it, because Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays are my days to dedicatedly work on comics. So that way I feel like I have done something this week. It's not like I haven't done anything, and I feel like I have accomplished a goal. I don't feel like I'm slacking. There's also a lot of, hey man, I understand that you want to do it and you're gung ho about this, but don't kill yourself over this. you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Because it's a
nothing's
lot. It's a
yeah,
lot of work, and
it really
it's
is.
and I think that's what's cool too, to just transition now into where people can check it out. Is you are putting out stuff a lot because you're working so hard, and as you were just saying, it's that drive, that passion that you have to make it. That I can't see myself doing anything else but making this comic, and and getting it out for the world to see. I think that's super cool. So I wanted to tap into your Patreon for supporting Veritas. So for everyone listening. John has a Patreon to support the comic, right? So could you talk about your Patreon real quick?
Yeah. It is www.patreon.com/veritascomic. If you actually go to the website for the comic, which is veritascomic.com, there is a link to the Patreon there. I occasionally post links to the Patreon on both my personal Twitter as well as the Twitter for Veritas itself. I now have an Instagram for the comic as well, all of which I can provide links to that I'm sure Ben can put somewhere as well.
Yeah.
But I can also plug those. I mean, it's all of it's pretty much Veritas Comic, at Veritas Comic on, I believe, both Twitter and Instagram. Veritascomic.com is the actual website. You'll find it. It's
Yeah. It's out there.
I have put it in as many places as possible, and hopefully it's not that hard to find. But again, I'm sure Ben will put a link to the comic with this episode as well. But the Patreon itself, I only really have 3 donation tiers at the moment: 1, 5, and 10. Because I understand donating to people that you don't know is a hard proposition, and I can only really provide comics that I have paid for to have drawn. So it's not like I can really provide you with much more. So I'm not asking for a lot of money if you feel like donating. Tier 1 is just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's $1. You didn't have to do that. If you want to give me $1, thanks so much, and I appreciate it. It's a lot of work and money to make comics, and I'm just glad that you feel like supporting. Tier 2 is $5. I give a shout out to everyone who donates $5 to the comic every time I post a page. And those names are underneath each page after the donation has gone through. So right now we have about 4 people who get that every time. And then the last tier is $10, which is going to be I'm going to eventually make a Discord, which is like kind of a chat server for Veritas, where you can talk with me about comics and talk about writing comics and the comic itself. And I might, in fact, like do some streams at some point of here's what it's like lettering. Let's talk while I letter or things like that. And what I can provide is is the experience that I have. I'm not critically acclaimed. I have not been doing this for a long time, quote unquote, but I'm doing this. And if I can impart some form of wisdom to someone that helps them or gives them an idea of maybe that they want to do this or helps them solve a problem that they've been having, I would love to do that. I would love to give back and pay that forward, because I was very lucky. I had some folks doing that for me, but I had to do a lot of this on my own. And I wish someone had sat down with me and talked about this, and I would love to do that for someone else, just because I know how important it is.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a perfect way to end it. Is thank you so much, John, for talking with me and with everyone listening about your comic Veritas, because Not only is it just fantastically written, and once again, we'll shout out Davis, fantastic art. Everyone go check out his work as well. Yeah, and everyone go support John on Patreon, as he was just saying. The tiers not only help keep the comic going, but also, just like he was saying, if you want to learn more about comics and making Veritas, and I know, having talked with John before at Stupid Buddy and other places, like we said at the beginning, he's got a lot of knowledge and experience that he's put into this, building his tools to write his own comic, but also just to enjoy the art that other people have made. So if you enjoy John's work, go support him on Patreon and check him out on and all the platforms you're on, John. Just to go over them again, there's obviously Veritas Comic, your website, and then you are on Webtoons and Tapas.
Yeah, if you search Veritas Comic, I believe on both Tapas and Webtoon, it should be one of the top ones that come up. There's other comics called Veritas. Who knew? And there are, some of them are also on Tapas and Webtoon. So you should be able to find it there. Heads up on those. Issue 1 is completely available on Tapas and Webtoon. The first 5 pages of any issue after that are the only pages available on Tapas and Webtoon. This was a way of me attempting to draw traffic to my website. So the website has all the comics, every page, for free. So it's not like I'm nickel and diming you out of this. I'm just saying I would like to take the readers that I have from those 2 other platforms and start siphoning them over to the website. And that's really the reason that I do that there, if you're curious.
Yeah, and for everyone who didn't catch the Patreon link, that's on your website as well.
Yes.
There's an About You page, and like John was saying, all the pages that he has up so far, all on his website. And I love where we are right now. I'm literally on my desktop. I have open issue 6, page 3, which is, at the time we're recording this, the latest one that's up, and it's this perfect, I'm not going to say cliffhanger, because I know it's just the middle of a conversation where they talk about the name Veritas and where it comes from. So if you guys, as a little teaser, want to go and learn about why this comic is named what it is, go on to John's website, veritascomic.com, and check out that issue.
Well, thank you, Ben. I really appreciate it. This was exciting. This was my, I do a podcast of my own, but this was the first time I have ever been a guest on a podcast, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for reaching out. I think this is a really cool thing that you're doing with other, artists, and kind of sharing those experiences. And I was happy to be a part of it.
But actually, while we still have you up, for people who are interested in learning more about comics, specifically DC Comics, where can they go to check out your podcast?
The DC Detectives podcast is on iTunes and SoundCloud. I'm really bad about updating Podbean, but if you just search the DC Detectives podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes, we have like 80 some odd episodes.
Wow.
We do like an episode every 2 weeks, and we've been doing that podcast for nearly like 4 years now. And we are in the 1960s. And we just actually talked about the first time the multiverse was ever really introduced in DC Comics. So we're talking a lot about what that means for comics in general, the writer behind it, Gardner Fox, and also how that affects the DC line as a whole in 1963, I believe, which is exciting. We're stoked, and now we're going to start, we kind of do all the characters that have individual books, and then we do JLA, and then we do all the characters with individual books again. So we just did a JLA episode. Now we're going to go back and alphabetically go through everyone's books again and catch them up. So that's I don't know, like 15 characters that we have to go through. So we're going to start with Adam amazing. Strange and get going again.
Oh, that's so awesome. So everyone, please check out John's podcast. I know some of you have been saying to me, I'm going to wait to check out your podcast till you have more episodes so I can binge it. Go check out John's podcast, because he's got enough episodes for you to binge it.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of content there. That's a good 80 plus hours of stuff for you to listen to if you're so inclined.
Yes, and if you're like me, driving for 4 hours a day, having a plethora of podcasts to subscribe to is a fantastic thing. And when you're ready to rest up and just enjoy reading what you love, go check out Veritas online. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and thanks again, John, for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And that concludes part 2 of Writing Comics with John Sollitto. I just want to thank John once again for coming on, and I want to thank all of you for listening. So if you guys want to check out the comic that we were able to talk about throughout these 2 episodes, you can go to veritascomic.com, which is John's website, and there he also has a link to his Patreon. Go support him. This comic is fantastic. And if you're still on the internet, you can go over to Twitter and check out @VeritasComic, which is where John's posting updates about the comic. You can also see those once again on his website. And you can follow John's artist, that is Davis GD, that is DEIVISGD on Twitter. And you can also check out the Twitter and Instagram for John's podcast, the DC Detectives Podcast, which on Instagram and Twitter is DCD Podcast. So check those out. And I would have more artist shout outs for you guys, but I don't have my papers in front of me. But there's so many great artists to check out, including, okay, I do have one. This is a shout out that I have to do to Brandon Mendoza, who goes by bmendoza_22 on Instagram. Brandon, if you're listening to this, you are like the first person to like all of our posts on Instagram, and I want to thank you for that. So if you're listening to this, I'm going to send you some free stickers. So thanks, Brandon, and thanks everyone for checking out this episode that we did with John. It was fun to record, and I look forward to doing more and more shout outs in the next upcoming episode. So thanks guys for listening, and until then, in whatever area of art you enjoy, literary arts like writing comics, performing arts, visual arts, keep on creating.